The clatter of silverware stopped mid-bite. My mother pushed her chair back from the bridal brunch table and stood up like she was about to make a toast. Instead, she looked straight at me and said loud enough for every relative to hear, "I won't watch my daughter marry a man who can't afford her lifestyle." The wedding planner's clipboard slipped from her hands. My bridesmaids froze with mimosas halfway to their mouths. My throat burned like I'd swallowed glass. Aunt Vera whispered something to Cousin Bianca. My mother straightened her Chanel jacket and added, "This wedding is an embarrassment to the Stone family name." Then she walked out of the restaurant, her heels clicking against marble while 30 people stared at me. My fiancé Aiden squeezed my hand under the table, but I couldn't breathe. The whispers started immediately, spreading like fire through dry grass. Someone's phone buzzed. Then another. Then mine. I looked down and saw a group message to our entire extended family. "I won't attend the wedding of a fool marrying for love instead of money." It was from my mother. The next morning, my phone rang at 6. It was the florist. "Ms. Bennett, we received a cancellation request for your wedding flowers. Can you confirm?" I sat up in bed, heart pounding. "I never requested a cancellation." She hesitated. "The email came from your address." I hung up and checked my inbox. Nothing. Then I checked my spam folder and found it. A fake cancellation notice, perfectly formatted, sent from an address that looked exactly like mine except for one letter. My hand shook as I forwarded it to Aiden. "My title for this nightmare story? My mom refused to attend my wedding, said my fiancé was too broke." If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. My name is Isla Bennett. I'm 31 years old, a UX researcher in Austin, Texas, and I thought I'd escaped my mother's obsession with status when I moved out at 18. I was wrong. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "You should thank me for saving you from a mistake." I knew that tone. It was my mother, Marjorie Stone, texting from a number I'd never seen before. When I was 10 years old, I watched my mother pack her suitcases while my stepdad Tom sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. Tom worked construction, had calloused hands and a warm laugh, and he loved us completely. But he didn't make enough money for my mother's taste. "Love doesn't pay bills," she told me while folding her silk blouses. "Remember that, Isla. Marry smart, not soft." She moved out that weekend to be with Richard Stone, a commercial real estate developer who drove a Mercedes and took her to charity galas. Tom stayed in our small house and kept paying my school fees even though he wasn't my biological father. My mother married Richard 3 months later and started introducing herself as Marjorie Stone. She sent me birthday cards with checks inside but rarely called. When I graduated college, she showed up in designer sunglasses and left before the ceremony ended. Years passed. Then I got engaged, and suddenly she wanted back in. "I need to approve your wedding dress," she'd said over the phone. I should have known then what was coming. Aiden Pierce was the opposite of everything my mother valued. He wore plain gray shirts and drove a 10-year-old SUV with a dent in the bumper. He didn't talk about his work much, just said he ran a small tech company that did data analytics. My mother met him once at a family dinner and called him that accountant or something 4 months afterward. She never bothered to learn what he actually did. What she didn't know was that Aiden had built his startup from nothing, worked 18-hour days for years, and treated every person he met with genuine kindness. He remembered my coffee order. He called Tom on Father's Day. He never once asked me to be anything other than myself. I loved him for his modesty and his steady hands. My mother saw only the old car and the quiet voice and decided he wasn't enough. 3 weeks before the wedding, she cornered me at a bridal boutique. "Call it off, Isla. Before you ruin your life." I walked out without answering, but her words stayed in my head like smoke. The ultimatum came by email. "I will not attend a wedding that damages our family's reputation. If you proceed with this mistake, you proceed without me." I read it 3 times, sitting in my office while my coworkers chatted around me. My mother had always weaponized shame, but this felt different. Colder. More final. I called Aiden during my lunch break. She says she won't come. He was quiet for a moment. Do you want her there? I didn't know how to answer. Part of me still hoped she'd change her mind, apologize, see that love mattered more than money. The other part of me, the part that remembered her packing those suitcases, knew better. I want her to try, I said finally. Just once. That night, I replied to her email with one sentence. I'm marrying him anyway. The next morning, the venue manager called. My mother had tried to cancel our booking, claiming she was calling on my behalf. They'd stopped the cancellation because it violated our contract, but the manager sounded nervous. Has there been a change in plans? No change, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. The wedding is still on. I found the fake cancellation email in my inbox 2 days later, buried under work notifications. It had been forwarded from a dummy account designed to look like mine. The signature matched perfectly. The wording sounded like me. But I never wrote it. I checked the email headers and traced it back to an IP address I recognized. My mother's home office. She'd been sending cancellation requests to every vendor on our list, one by one, pretending to be me. The photographer, the DJ, the caterer, all of them had received identical messages. Some had already responded, asking for confirmation. Aiden spent the entire evening on the phone, calling each vendor personally to reinstate our contracts. His voice stayed calm even when mine cracked. Yes, the wedding is happening. No, those emails weren't from my fiancé. We'll send written confirmation by morning. I sat on the couch, shaking with betrayal. My phone buzzed. Cousin Bianca. Isla, your mom's telling everyone Aiden lost his job. Is that true? I stared at the message, my chest tightening. The lies were spreading faster than I could stop them. Within a week, half my family believed I was making a terrible mistake. Aunt Vera called to say she was concerned about my future. Uncle Paul sent a long text about financial stability and making smart choices. Cousin Bianca stopped responding to my messages altogether. At a family barbecue I couldn't avoid, my Aunt Claire cornered me by the dessert table. You should have picked stability, not love, she said, her voice low and pitying. We're just trying to protect you. I excused myself and sat in my car in the parking lot, crying so hard I couldn't see. Aiden found me 20 minutes later. He didn't say anything at first, just reached through the window and held my hand. Let them talk, he said quietly. We know our truth. But the truth didn't matter when my mother was louder. That evening, she posted on Facebook a long rant about how Aiden was using me for money I didn't even have, how I was too blind to see it, how she was protecting her daughter from a con artist. The post got 43 likes. My hand shook as I blocked her account. I agreed to have dinner with her one last time, hoping to end the war before the wedding. She arrived 30 minutes late, dripping in diamonds that caught the restaurant lights. She ordered the most expensive wine without asking what Aiden wanted, then spent the meal criticizing everything from his shirt to his career. Data analytics, she said with a dismissive wave. How quaint. Aiden stayed polite the entire time, answering her questions calmly even when they were designed to embarrass him. When the check came, she didn't reach for her purse. Aiden paid without hesitation. As we stood to leave, my mother leaned close and whispered loud enough for him to hear. Marry him, and you marry mediocrity. Don't say I didn't warn you. She swept out of the restaurant, leaving behind a printed document on the table. I picked it up. It was titled Pre-Wedding Agreement, written by her personal lawyer. Aiden read over my shoulder, his jaw tightening. The first line demanded financial disclosure to protect family interests. I tore it in half right there in the restaurant. The contract my mother left behind was 10 pages long, single-spaced, filled with legal terms designed to humiliate Aiden. It required him to disclose all assets, debts, and income projections for the next 5 years. It demanded a prenuptial agreement that heavily favored the bride's family interests. It even included a clause about lifestyle maintenance that would require Aiden to prove he could provide for me at a level my mother deemed acceptable. I threw it in the trash. That night, my stepdad Tom called. His voice was strained. "Isla, your mother threatened to pull my pension investment if I attend the wedding." My heart dropped. "She what?" "She's telling people I'm betraying the family by supporting you. She called my employer, said I was being irresponsible with my finances." His voice cracked. "I don't care what she does to me, honey. I'm walking you down that aisle." I cried into the phone while Aiden held me. My mother wasn't just sabotaging my wedding anymore. She was destroying everyone who stood by me. The vendors started backing out one by one. The florist called to apologize. "Your mother said you called off the engagement." She sounded very convincing. The DJ sent an email citing scheduling conflicts. The caterer left a voicemail explaining they'd been offered double payment to book another event on our date. Aiden found the fake reviews online that evening. Someone using my mother's maiden name had posted 1-star ratings for our photographer, claiming they'd ruined another wedding. The photographer was furious, threatening to drop us entirely until Aiden showed him proof the reviews were fraudulent. "I've never seen anything like this," the photographer said, shaking his head. "Someone really wants to stop this wedding." I sat at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning, staring at our vendor list with half the names crossed out. My world was unraveling, and I couldn't stop it. Then Aiden's phone buzzed on the counter. A news notification. Pierce Analytics rumored in $600 million acquisition talks. He picked it up quickly, but I'd already seen it. "What is that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Aiden sat down across from me, his face pale. "I've been under NDA for months. I couldn't tell anyone, not even you." My brain struggled to process what I was hearing. "Your company is being sold?" He nodded. "A tech firm out of San Francisco. The deal's been in negotiation since last year." I didn't want to say anything until it was final because I didn't want our relationship to change. I stared at him. "Change how?" "I didn't want you to see me differently. I didn't want your family to suddenly decide I was worth their time." He reached for my hand. "I didn't want our love measured in dollars." I thought about my mother's contempt, her constant dismissals, her certainty that Aiden was beneath us. And suddenly I understood. He'd known all along what people like her would do if they knew the truth. We sat in silence for a long time. Then my phone buzzed. Another email from my mother. "I'll pray the wedding fails before the embarrassment becomes public." The rehearsal dinner was supposed to include 40 people. 23 showed up. I stood in the private room of the restaurant, watching empty chairs and feeling my chest tighten. My bridesmaid, Kelsey, pulled me aside. "Your mom's hosting a brunch tomorrow morning," she whispered. "She's calling it a celebration for saving Isla's future." I felt dizzy. "Who's going?" Kelsey looked uncomfortable. "Half your cousins. Your Aunt Vera. Some family friends." I excused myself and went to the bathroom, where I splashed cold water on my face and tried to breathe. When I came back out, Tom was waiting in the hallway. He looked older suddenly, tired in a way I'd never seen before. "I have something for you," he said, pressing a flash drive into my palm. "Your mother's been sending emails. Lots of them. I think you should see what she's been saying." I closed my fingers around the drive. "Thank you for being here, Tom." His eyes filled with tears. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, kiddo." That night, Aiden held me while I cried into his shoulder. "I don't know if I can do this," I whispered. "Yes, you can," he said. "And you will." I plugged the flash drive into my laptop the next morning while Aiden was in the shower. What I found made my stomach turn. Emails to vendors, offering them extra money to cancel our contracts. Messages to family members, spreading lies about Aiden's bankruptcy and criminal record. A forwarded chain where my mother bragged about protecting her daughter from a disaster. There were dozens of them, meticulously saved by Tom, who'd been CC'd on the family emails. I read each one, my hands shaking. Then I closed the laptop and made a decision. I wouldn't retaliate publicly. I wouldn't scream or humiliate her. But I would protect myself. That afternoon, I hired a lawyer to send cease and desist letters to my mother and anyone helping her. I changed all our vendor passwords. I moved the rehearsal dinner to a new location and only told people I trusted. And then I waited. 2 days later, Aiden's acquisition officially closed. The number was everywhere. Forbes, Bloomberg, TechCrunch. Pierce Analytics sold for $580 million. Aiden's share? Approximately $200 million. My phone exploded with notifications. Is it true? Cousin Bianca's text came through at 7 in the morning. Then Aunt Vera. We need to talk about the wedding. Uncle Paul sent a long apology I didn't bother reading. My mother's text came an hour later, her tone completely different from every message before it. Sweetheart, I think we had a misunderstanding. Can we talk? I stared at the word sweetheart like it was written in a foreign language. She hadn't called me that since I was a child. More messages flooded in. Relatives who'd ignored me for weeks suddenly wanted to reconnect. Friends of my mother started following me on social media. Someone sent a screenshot of a group chat where my mother was frantically asking, why didn't anyone tell me he was rich? I showed the messages to Aiden, who just shook his head. What do you want to do? I thought about it for a long time. Nothing yet. Let her sweat. That evening, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced, carrying a bouquet of white roses and wearing an expression I'd never seen before. Fear. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. We need to talk, she said. My mother stood in my doorway, her perfectly applied makeup unable to hide the panic in her eyes. I was worried about you, she said, her voice trembling in a way I'd never heard before. I was trying to protect you from making a mistake. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. By lying to vendors? By telling everyone Aiden was broke? She flinched. I didn't realize he was so successful. If you'd known, you would have acted differently, I interrupted. That's the problem, Mom. Your love has a price tag. She clutched the roses tighter. I made mistakes, but I'm still your mother. Surely I deserve a place at your wedding. I didn't answer right away. Behind me, Aiden appeared in the hallway but stayed back, letting me handle this. I'll check the guest list, I said finally. But I'm not making any promises. My mother's face brightened with hope. Thank you, sweetheart. You won't regret this. After she left, I closed the door and leaned against it. Are you really going to invite her? Aiden asked. I don't know yet, I admitted. But I'm done letting her control me. I made the decision 3 days before the wedding. We'd moved the ceremony to a private estate an hour outside Austin, a beautiful property owned by one of Aiden's business partners. Only 40 people received the new address, sent through encrypted messages to prevent leaks. Every vendor signed an NDA. The photographer agreed to keep all images private until we approved their release. The caterer was paid extra for discretion. I didn't tell my mother about any of it. As far as she knew, the wedding was still happening at the original venue, a hotel ballroom downtown. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up to a text from Kelsey. Your mom just posted on Instagram. She's at the hotel in full hair and makeup. I opened Instagram and saw the photo. My mother in a floor-length gold gown, standing in the empty lobby of the downtown hotel with a confused expression. The caption read, "Waiting for my beautiful daughter's big day." The comments were already filling with questions. Isn't the wedding at 2? Why is no one else there? I put my phone down and smiled. The real ceremony was starting in 4 hours. Tom walked me down the garden aisle at exactly 2 o'clock. The afternoon sun filtered through oak trees, casting soft shadows on the rows of white chairs. 40 people stood as we approached, but I only saw Aiden. He was crying before I even reached him, and I started crying too. The officiant, one of Aiden's college professors, kept the ceremony short and meaningful. When we said our vows, I promised to never make Aiden prove his worth. He promised to never let me forget mine. When we kissed, the small crowd erupted in applause. It was perfect. Intimate. Ours. We walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, while a string quartet played. Tom hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. I'm so proud of you, kiddo. At the reception, we danced and laughed and forgot about everything outside those garden walls. Then my phone buzzed in my clutch. Kelsey leaned over. Someone posted photos to Instagram. Your mom's seen them. I glanced at my phone. 15 missed calls from my mother. I turned it off and slid it back into my clutch. Tonight wasn't about her. My mother arrived at the estate gate at 7 o'clock, just as dinner was being served. Security called my phone, but I'd turned it off. They called Aiden's instead. There's a woman here claiming to be the bride's mother. She's demanding entry. Aiden looked at me across the table. What do you want to do? Every guest had gone quiet, watching us. I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress. Let her in, but keep security close. My mother appeared 5 minutes later, storming across the garden in her gold gown, her face red with fury. She stopped at the edge of our table, breathing hard. You humiliated me, she hissed. You left me standing in that hotel lobby like a fool while you had your secret wedding. The guests whispered. Someone's phone was recording. I stayed calm, my voice steady. No, Mom. You did that yourself. She blinked, stunned. I'm your mother. I deserved to be here. You deserved nothing after what you did, I said quietly. But I'm still here, asking for a chance to fix this, she pressed, her voice desperate now. I reached into my clutch and pulled out an envelope. Before you ask for anything else, you should read this. I handed my mother the sealed envelope. She opened it with shaking hands, pulling out the printed pages inside. Her face went pale as she read. They were copies of every email she'd sent to vendors, every lie she'd told to family, every attempt to sabotage our wedding. Call logs from the venue. Screenshots of fake reviews. Forwarded messages where she bragged about saving me from Aiden. All of it, documented and timestamped. Where did you get these? She whispered. People talk, Mom. Especially when you hurt them. I gestured to Tom, who stood near the back of the garden. Tom forwarded me everything you CC'd him on. The vendors kept records of your calls. It wasn't hard to piece together. She looked around at the watching guests, her humiliation complete. This is what love costs under your name, I said. Manipulation. Lies. Control. I don't want that kind of love anymore. My mother's mouth opened, but no words came out. She stood there for a long moment, holding the papers, before finally turning and walking away. Security escorted her to the gate. No one stopped her. The garden was silent until she disappeared. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Soon the entire reception was applauding. We served dinner after my mother left. Aiden stood up to give a toast halfway through the meal, his hand warm in mine. Most of you know Isla and I don't care much about money or status, he began. We care about people. About showing up. About doing right by the ones we love. He paused, looking at me. Isla's grandmother, Ruth, raised her when her mother couldn't. Ruth worked 2 jobs to keep Isla in school. She never asked for recognition. She just loved. I felt tears starting again. So tonight, Isla and I are announcing the Ruth Bennett Scholarship Fund. $5 million dedicated to young women pursuing careers in technology, especially those from low-income families. The room erupted in cheers. Aiden continued, because the measure of wealth isn't what you have. It's what you give. I stood and hugged him while everyone applauded. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of my mother standing outside the garden wall, frozen in place. She'd heard everything. She stood there for a long moment before finally walking to her car and driving away. That night, lying in bed at the estate's guest house, my phone buzzed. I turned it back on after the reception ended. A text from my mother's number. I made mistakes. Please don't forget me when you're on magazine covers. I stared at the message for a long time. Aiden read over my shoulder. What are you going to say? I typed slowly. We're not seeking covers. We're seeking peace. Then I blocked her number. Aiden pulled me close. How do you feel? I thought about it. Empty wasn't the right word. Neither was sad. Free, I said finally. I feel free. We fell asleep holding each other while moonlight filtered through the curtains. Outside, the garden was quiet except for crickets and the rustle of wind through oak trees. Inside, everything felt still. The next morning, we drove to the airport for our honeymoon. As we boarded the plane, I looked back one last time at the city where I'd grown up, where my mother still lived, where so much pain had happened. Then I turned forward and didn't look back again. We honeymooned in Tuscany, staying in a small villa surrounded by vineyards. Every morning, I woke up to Aiden making coffee on the terrace while the sun rose over rolling hills. We spent our days wandering through medieval towns, eating pasta, and talking about everything except the wedding. On our 4th day there, I started journaling. I wrote about boundaries and self-worth and the difference between being loved and being controlled. I wrote about Tom, who'd shown me what real family looked like. I wrote about the relief I felt not performing for my mother anymore. Aiden found me writing one afternoon and sat beside me. Any regrets? None, I said honestly. You? He kissed my forehead. Only that we didn't do this sooner. We donated money to a women's shelter in Florence that helped daughters escape controlling parents. The director cried when she thanked us. On our last night in Italy, an envelope arrived at our villa. I opened it nervously. It was a legal notice. My mother was being sued for defamation by the photographer whose business she'd tried to ruin with fake reviews. We returned to Austin 2 weeks later, tanned and rested. The lawsuit against my mother was moving forward. The photographer had hired a lawyer and filed suit for damages to his reputation and lost business. Tom called to tell me he was finally divorcing my mother for good. She showed her true colors, he said. I can't pretend I don't see them anymore. Aunt Vera reached out to apologize. So did Cousin Bianca and Uncle Paul. Some apologies I accepted. Others I declined. I learned I didn't owe anyone forgiveness just because they asked for it. My mother's social circle started distancing themselves from her. The women she'd tried to impress at charity galas stopped inviting her to events. Her reputation, the one she'd protected so fiercely, was crumbling. Kelsey told me my mother had shown up at a luncheon uninvited and been asked to leave. She looked smaller somehow, Kelsey said. Like she'd shrunk. I felt a flicker of something. Not quite pity. Maybe just sadness for what could have been if she'd chosen differently. But I didn't reach out. That door was closed. Aiden and I settled into our new life together. We bought a house with a garden and adopted a dog. 6 months after the wedding, we launched the Ruth Bennett Scholarship Fund officially. The event was small, held at a university auditorium, with 50 people in attendance. Reporters showed up, asking questions about the fund's mission and Aiden's tech success. One reporter asked about my mother. I understand there was some family drama around your wedding. Would you like to comment? I smiled calmly. My mother taught me ambition. I'm grateful for that lesson. But she also taught me that love isn't currency. That's the more important lesson. The reporter scribbled notes. Will she be involved in the scholarship fund? No, I said simply. This fund honors my grandmother, who showed up when it mattered. That's what we're celebrating today. The first scholarship recipient was a girl named Maya, 17, whose single father worked 3 jobs to support her. She cried when we handed her the award. I thought I'd have to give up on college, she said. You didn't just give me money. You gave me hope. I hugged her while cameras flashed. This was what mattered. Not status. Not approval. Just showing up for people who needed it. I saw my mother one last time, a year after the wedding. She was at a coffee shop near my office, sitting alone with a newspaper. She looked older. Tired. Her designer clothes were still perfect, but something in her posture had changed. She saw me and froze. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she stood slowly, like she might approach. I gave her a small nod, acknowledging her presence but nothing more. She nodded back, understanding. Then I walked past her to the counter, ordered my coffee, and left. That night, I told Aiden about the encounter. How did it feel? He asked. Like closing a chapter, I said. She's not my villain anymore. She's just someone I used to know. He pulled me close. I'm proud of you. We sat together on our porch, watching the sunset, our dog asleep at our feet. I thought about everything that had happened. The brunch. The sabotage. The lies. The wedding. The scholarship fund. All of it had led here, to this quiet moment. My mother had taught me that love was currency, something to be earned and measured and controlled. I'd learned love was choice. Love was showing up. Love was quiet mornings beside the man she once called broke. That was my revenge. Not humiliation. Not cruelty. Just peace. And that peace was worth more than any price tag she could imagine. Some people measure love in net worth. I measure mine in moments like this. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What does family mean to you? Please share below and subscribe to this channel for more stories like mine.